Hey everybody, this is Ray Flip, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool. Welcome you back to our weekly recap review of Freeform Siren. We're going to be taking a look at the 8th episode, Being Human, and as we all remember from last week, not only did we get a lot of action and a lot of violence and a lot of death, we especially had a major loss to Bristol Cove as Xander lost his father Sean. And going into this week's episode, we know that Bristol Cove is going to be coming together to mourn that loss. This is a quiet episode, probably the best way to put it. A quiet episode that I think is necessary after everything we've had building up to this point. When I say quiet, I don't mean that nothing happens, and I'm going to talk about that in a couple minutes, but it's a quiet episode where we really get to focus on the character of Xander, which up to this point we've seen as being part of the group of the supporting cast, but this is an episode, understandably so, considering his loss, where his character really gets to shine, and we get some very, very interesting backstory in the process. Again, the whole entire backdrop, for the most part, even when it's not actually there, is Sean's funeral. And it's very interesting at this point because we have them returning to Bristol Cove, and the story being that Sean got caught up in the fisherman nets and went overboard and was lost. And both the combination of the tragedy and also the fact that he's an experienced fisherman, I think, has had some people questioning that story. So it makes for a very uncomfortable situation when you have a lot of people who pretty much know what was going on and what happened out there. So you especially have Xander not only burying his father, but having to bury the truth, which I was just thinking about that right off the top of my head. We have Ben, who's feeling a lot of guilt, and he's acting out towards Ren. He's saying that he doesn't blame her, but on the other hand, he's coming at her about mermaids and her people and her sister Donna with such a venom that, again, there's a level of unfairness that Ben is throwing at Ren. Rin is trying to learn, and I think that's the basis of the title of Being Human, is that we see Rin putting herself in situations where she is trying to learn about humanity and the human aspect of her. And it's this idea again that, when you look at it, Rin versus Donna, it's kind of like us. It's the individuality, and I think Rin is especially hurt and insulted by this idea of, like, don't judge me by my sister. We come from dealing with this from two completely different perspectives. I think it's also interesting where Rin makes the reference to being part mermaid, part human. Again, there's some debate online about whether she meant that actually, or was she talking about that from how she was feeling. I'm going with it from an actual standpoint. I'm going to tell you the reason why in a few minutes, because it feeds into my big Helen conspiracy. But in the learning process, I have to give props to the sea lion scene. I think that was just a beautiful, sweet moment. And again, I give props to Elaine Powell, because the way she handled that scene, it could have gone cheesy and bad in so many different ways, and it did it. And that's one of the things I really took out of that scene. And again, I think Elaine Powell, what she's been doing with the character of Ren, I think has just been excellent through these 8 episodes. We then get to a point where Ren and Xander, and you get the sense of, even though Rin is trying to deal with sadness and deal with the mourning process, we don't want her interacting with Xander too much, because again, Xander not realizing who Rin is and the realization and everything that's going to come into play. Yeah. And when I say come into play, it's going to come into play now, because we've got Ben, who ends up telling Helen about everything that happened, because Helen's is like, I'm not buying into the story, of course, because it's Helen and because of Helen's mysterious backstory. So she's not buying into it. She says, look, Xander needs to know. You need to tell him, and you need to watch out, because that's not going to go well. So Ben and Maddie, and probably, I will say this, one of my biggest problems with this episode, you just can't pick the guy's funeral and all of everything that's happening to finally tell him the truth about who knew, what knew, how knew, and everything like that. Possibly the worst example of timing I've ever seen. And especially when when someone storms away after hearing all that, you gotta give them time. Again, not a smart move on Ben's part. So, calling into question a little bit of the common sense on Ben and Maddie's part. What I found interesting, now that we've mentioned Maddie, is that we see that Maddie and Xander have a backstory. And there's a moment where we see Maddie getting him on board his father's boat, which is very sweet and touching, the idea that Xander wants to spend the night on his late father's boat. And we see the exchange, and I believe we've posted it on the site here, where it's clearly established there is some backstory there. Now, clearly Xander has feelings for her. How much level Maddie may feel for him, we don't know. Again, I don't know. I like the idea of Ben and Maddie being able to make it through all of this and stay a couple, but the whole thing about Ben and Rin and the whole idea with her Siren song and the way he's being affected, and now that we've entered in the backstory with Xander and Maddie, I'm a little concerned that we're going to go in the direction of we're going to couple everybody out. Again, I like the strength of Ben and Maddie. I really liked them as a couple since we've first seen them, so I hope that continues moving forward. But the Xander dynamic really just makes things interesting. What also makes things interesting is that we see there is some connection between Helen and Ted, Ben's dad, because there's references about monthly payments being received, and Helen makes reference to family, and I'm going to now classify this, what I'm about to say, as the dun-dun-dun moment of the episode, because it's not really a moment of the episode, it's more just this theory that I have. I've been telling you all along that I think, clearly Helen's established as being a mermaid. Now, what she may be, I feel like she's an offspring between a human and a mermaid. Having said that, I think what that means is that Helen and Rin are directly related, directly connected, however that may want to be. My first thought was, oh my god, Helen might be Rin's mom. I don't know, I think my logic circuits were going off a little bit that, but I definitely think there can be some kind of family connection there, and I think that's where this is coming from, because I think Ted and that group have been paying Helen to stay quiet, maybe help give information in the past about the mermaids. Maybe Helen thought she was keeping some kind of detente between them. I don't know. But yeah, I definitely think Helen is going to play a major, major factor in this. So yeah, that was, again, not so much something that happened, but something I feel like in the remaining episodes we're going to be touching upon a lot more. Going on to a couple of other characters, Chris is leaving. Can you blame him? I mean, I know I can't, with all the government and everything that's going on. Do I think he's going to get fired? Do I think he's going to get dragged back in? Yeah, I absolutely do. But I can't blame him for leaving. Just like with Calvin and Janine, there was some comments being made about, I saw some people online talking about the issue of them, like, hooking up at the funeral and with everything going on and everything. Actually, I got to be honest with you. It's one of the things I respect about the episode, because things like that do tend to happen at wakes and post-funeral services and things like that. It's just the extreme needing to be with one another and that vibing of emotion. It happens a lot more often than people realize, and sometimes people get a little judgy about it, but I actually found that refreshingly real. I really appreciated that. A couple other side notes I want to talk about. Decker, smart move, I gotta say this. Getting Elaine involved in the whole test trial runs, brilliant move. Now, where that potentially could lead, I think, is very interesting. But even just on a sleazy surface level, that's Decker getting more control on the family, and that means more leverage over Ben. And by the way, in case we thought everything that I said was a nice, quiet, intense, get-to-know-everybody episode, there's something I did leave out. Yeah, Donna's back. She's brought some mermaid representation. They want Rin back. How well do you think this is going to go? I'm thinking probably not that well at all. How not well? Well, next episode is called Street Fight, just to give you some perspective. And believe it or not, we are actually staring down the final 2 episodes. That's right, we were staring down episodes 9 and 10, so we were actually coming to the end. I don't know if the announcement's been made yet, but I'm going to work under the safe assumption that Siren is going to get renewed, which it should, because they've been doing an excellent job this season. And this episode, like I said, was a quality episode that gave us a chance to get to know a lot of the characters in a quieter setting, but not so quiet that we didn't get some important information that kept us really wanting to see where the next 2 episodes are going to take us. So I'm really looking forward to that. Once again, my name is Ray Flick, television beat writer for Bleeding Cool. We are got 2 more episodes coming up. We're going to be here next week to take a look at Street Fight. Very much looking forward to that.